Greetings, Summoners. Cosmic here, and welcome back to another Battle Spirits Saga video. And today we have the first look at the meta for Savior of Chaos, or BSS04. And a lot of people are going to be asking the question of, is Hydra really tier 0, or is it overblown in the same way that Gale was in the last set? And at least from the first top 8, we do have a good Hydra representation, but there were some other decks in top 8, and spoiler, at the Mexico event that just happened this past weekend, which I'm not sure if we're going to be getting the full list for or not, Serpents actually won, so another purple deck. And at least for me, I've been trying to brew up some stuff on the side, and there's actually a really sweet green list that I like that seems to do pretty well into Hydra. I just haven't had a chance to test against the rest of the matchup. So I think overall, one of the things that we're going to be seeing is that Hydra is the most straightforward and powerful deck to build kind of day one. This is like your traditional aggro decks that always do well at the start of a format, but I am going to expect, like we did see in all the formats previously, there is a centralized deck that is very easy, very straightforward to build, and quite powerful that the new players are going to play in those events and do very well with. But I think what we'll see with this format, as we did in the previous format, is that the best players are going to just pick a deck and do very well with it, and we will get to see kind of this rotating format overall. So that's kind of my high level quick thoughts on the meta overall. Of course, we're going to see how this develops in the following weeks, but I do think, at least from some of the comments that I've been seeing, that the Hydra, impact is a little bit overblown, but I do think it is still a very solid deck. And hey, at the end of the day, I am a blue main, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but we will see how the meta shakes up in the following weeks. So with that, the other disclaimer that I have to add here is that there were no top cuts for this event. The Mexico event did have a top cut, and then the Texas event, which is this weekend, I think there's also a European event this weekend, if I'm not mistaken. The European event does have a top cut, but the North American event does not have a top cut. So we're just going to report these out as 6-0, 5-1s, and 4-2s, right? Just talk about the overall, what placed top 8, and then we'll talk about the other events that have a top cut, if we get there, who the actual, champion was. Not to, of course, take away anything from Adam, who is our undefeated Hydra list from this event, but I know there's been a lot of community discussion around top cuts versus no top cuts, impact that this would have on kind of the placement of some of these lists. So take this with a grain of salt. We'll cover the top lists when we get them from the other events. But for now, again, we're just going to be talking about the Oceania Grand Open, or Grand Tour. I'm going to keep calling them Grand Opens, apparently. So again, huge shout out to Adam, our undefeated with the Hydra list. And, well, not much to be really said about this if you've caught our other video or if you've kind of been following the set overall. This is about as much of a self-built deck as we could expect within set 4 meta, and we've talked about this before we knew what the promo was going to be, right? But generally speaking, we have our early Aberration plays, which are going to ramp us. We have our Defender, we have our Ascend fodder, we have now Poland, which is going to filter out some Nexuses for us, or if you have like the Impaler version, it allows you to then Impaler something back from the graveyard as well. We have everyone's favorite card, Frog, as we're going to call it on this YouTube video and not use the full name. But Frog is really where this kind of breaks into, is this now too good? Because when you're able to stack up multiple of these, and clearly it was designed to be an anti-white control answer, right, in terms of let's balance the scales a little bit more in terms of how these two decks will interact. However, because it is going to ramp itself a core off of the Nexus, and because of how insanely strong it is in multiples when you hit the Hydra on curve, it is probably just a little bit too strong. And for me personally, even if I am a blue main, this is one card I like to see looked at in terms of a overall impact. Now, yes, removing this does then say, oh, but then white always beats up on blue and you're never going to win. Maybe you side in some mandalas, maybe you change up your sideboard package a little bit, but I think at least transitions it into a game that you can play instead of just a, oops, I frogged, you lose, right? So that is a little bit of a comparison here to where this might shift, but then otherwise, right, your 3 staples, plus your Hydra is a staple, plus the new Nexus is a staple. The other new Nexus, Seabed's good because it cuts out your opponent's resources. Strong Draw because you're effectively a combo deck that wants to filter. Starblessed Draw, now because we have core ramping in blue, we just want more draw. Ancient Draw, more draw, right? Dream Bomb, really great in the Ascend meta, and then Floodstream for the anti-aggro. So, 99% of this deck does feel like it is a bit of a build itself with some more interesting, variation happening in the Discord, which you can find a link to in the description. But overall, I think this is going to be the great starting point. And for the first event of the meta, this is a absolutely fine list, but a lot of us are expecting that this is going to be a list that you need to test against and something that will be top of mind. Some of the sideboard options, we do have Smag just for some color reduction. Again, the opponent's own seabeds. How do you get around seabed? Play Smag because it counts as every color, and then you're not color locked anymore. So really cool anti-blue tech, Shark for going wide, and also again gets the rampa stuff. I really do love Dustworm Dragon. This is one that we're going to see time and time again, and also got a really sweet Eva promo, so a great reason to have it in the sideboard. But just a 5k nuke with a body is just really good. We've seen this time and time again in the earlier metas where like Andromeda, sometimes just being able to pop a 3k was really strong. Now we can hit something for 5k, and the other abilities kind of whatever, but sometimes you just need to swing for game, and this can be a free reduction because of its ability where you're only going to pay 3 for it. So very efficient removal that also comes with the body. You love to see it. Deadly Balance can help pop some of those 2 symbols if your opponent is board light. Feral Slash, Anti-Nexus, we've seen this time and time again, and then just a 4th Dream Bomb for other Ascend targets or other areas where you really want to see a bounce effect. So again, overall, I think this is a great starting point for the Hydra list, and one that we would expect to see pop up in a few more events, but this is about as streamlined and as mono blue as we would expect these lists to be. Again, if you can't get the 4 frogs, that does line up some other options of where you might want to have some flex spots with it. Maybe you just go all in on the combo and go even harder into things like Ancient Draw so you can find your Hydras with increased consistency. But ultimately, between the 4 Strong Draw and the 4 Star Blessed Draw, you should get there the vast majority of the time. Moving on from there, we have Ryan on white aggro, and yes, we are still going to keep things honest, right? If we accept that Hydra is kind of the turn 3, turn 4 checkmate in the meta right now, what's a great way to answer that is just kill them faster, right? Or find a way to interact. In this case, Ryan took the standard, I want to spend $5 on a deck and win white aggro list. And not much needs to be said about this, but if you are new to the game, you might not be familiar with white aggro, but it is basically the premier aggro deck that just wants to vomit its hand, check you on turn 2 and say, did you have the Floodstream or I guess now Raging Tides? If not, okay, you're dead. Let's go to the next game, right? Because of Valkyrie Mist just getting that massive value in reduction and being able to pop anything that your opponent is going to play early back to hand. We talked about just how good that removal was for Andromeda and the Dustworm Drought Dragon, right? But now Valkyrie Mist allows you to do it on color, bounce something back to hand, and then still try to get through a point of damage. So Valkyrie Mist really being still the MVP of how this all comes together. A little bit moving away from the Librarian that we've seen in terms of getting the Soul Core back and extending your plays. And then, of course, just a 2 of Derm Dyna to really try to chip in that last point of damage. If your opponent gets a chance to stabilize, that can just say, oops, sorry, you played a Nexus. Now my guys can swing through. Other than that, we do see Hydra in the sideboard, which I do like for just more disruption, more bounce options because it returns anything to hand. Gorgeous Judge Foil as well. Star Blessed Draw, Punish Summon, Summon Effects, Suppression, really interesting tech as we've seen a couple times before because you're able to get back that Soul Core because sometimes in the aggro matchups, you just want a 3k boost, which is enough to wall out your opponent, and then extra copies of Thorn Prison if you want to just try to clear through for a game. So very standard list from what we've seen. Going all the way back to set 2, technically. I mean, it was somewhere in set 1 as well, but we really didn't see things start to come online until set 2, where we got green and the Thorn Prisons really helped out. And then some mix of, 1 cost that we got in set 2 or set 3 that just gave us more low to the ground options. And of course, there's a couple other ones, if I remember correctly, in set 4, but kind of don't need them. This list is just goated for what it wants to be doing. Moving on from there, shout out to James, a person after my own heart, with the Smag pile or just oops all ramp into high-end deck. I've talked about this in the previous videos about one that I was really excited for because, again, at the end of the day, you have here's all my ramp, here's all my draw. I can do whatever I want with my top end. And James decided to go with, hey, why not showcase the new Ira and Nova combo? Because Ira is going to clear the board, Nova lets you heal up. So you kind of get the all-in-one package between those two, depending on the sequencing that you're going to want to be doing. But it does beg the question, should we just still be playing Curse combo? Because that does hit everything on the board, where Ira does leave your opponent with that double symbol that can still kind of block you out. That said, if we were playing the Nexus, which we'll talk about in a later list, right? You do have some other ways to restand Ira, make sure it's getting through for some double damage, right? What's interesting about this is because you're popping stuff, you can also just draw even more cards because you want to flood the field. So it's interesting in that regard in terms of like, hey, let's just have even more draw engine built into it. But for me personally, this is one that I would have to test in terms of, is Hydra at the top end what I want? Is Curse Combo still kind of the GOAT? Kind of where do we want to go from there? And I know that when we had a chance to interview Caleb, who was our world champion, right, and played a similar list where his was more white control on the top end, we talked about, hey, how much of this low end ramp do we really want to play? And we actually got the Prey Bird ramp as well, which is making an appearance here as a 4 of. So just another early body that you can play. Yes, it does require the Soul Core, so it's not nearly as good as those double Matte and Gold plays that we saw early on for just really getting ahead, but it does still lend itself well to giving you that early ramp for green, which then also counts as a reduction for Alarune. And because of its cost and because it's going to give you a core back, it does help you kind of extend your hand very quickly, or empty your hand very quickly, I should say, to get Smag to be a draw spot as well. So other than that, kind of what we expected to see, if you're planning around a lot of blue, just all on Nexus Hate, right? 4 Andromeda, 4 Burning Force, 4 Newman Guards, because we know this is our good draw and core ramp in the deck. I do love seeing that the Dustworm here as well, just being an extra pop. And the spell lineup is kind of what we've seen time and time again. So then going into the sideboard, we do have things like Fula, so anti-core removal strategies. We have more of the Dustworm in case you really just want to pressure out. If someone gets you down to 3 very quickly, get out more of that red reduction, which again, our deck can utilize here quite well. Pops 5k, very nice. Ira just cleaning up more of the board, letting us draw more. Deadly Balance and Avalanche being really key pieces against Ascend Spirits. I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot more of that as this meta continues. And then 2 Ancient Draw, because I guess they just want some extra draw, and you have the cores to use it, so hey, why not? I'm very curious to see how much this one really came up. Like, Ray, if you're bringing in the Ira, then I'm guessing you bring this in because then you have 4 targets off of it, so you get the extra draw and you're likely to hit something, but I'm wondering how much that was actually live for them versus just to know another card that was a 2 of. Moving in there from Floyd with the Serpents, keeping the Purple Dream alive. And also, again, shout out to this just winning in Mexico as well. And I want to give a special shout out to Mirrorcaster because this is one that I got dogged on pretty badly in the Discord. And I said, hey, this is literally all Serpents wanted. This is exactly where you want to be with the deck. And now twice we have seen this X-Rare perform quite well in bringing online the Serpent package. So, Felong was it was a fun card in set 3, and that really helped get Serpents a couple wins or tops within the meta, but I really think it's Mirrorcaster here that is going to be doing the work that brings this all online together. Now, I do have to give a special shout out here to Bark Maiden, which is one that I think we're going to be seeing a bit more of because it does recycle itself and let you play a 5-drop or less for free. I'm really curious to see how people are going to break this card in the future because I think it is absolutely insane for what it wants to be doing. But overall, we are playing just kind of more of a snake tempo type of list, which has Mirrorcaster, which can provide you just an absurd amount of value. Of course, with Rotting Swamp still giving us even more card draw. But the one thing I know a lot of people are going to challenge is why on earth is there only 2 Absolute Ice Shields? And again, this is something that we have seen in the past with white aggro not running any Absolute Ice Shields. We've seen some red aggro lists that were running either 0 to 2. And because within Serpents, you just have a high amount of draw and efficiency of burning through your deck, generally speaking, you only want to see one of those Absolute Ice Shields for how the game plan is going to go anyways, so it does make sense here to cut down to just 2 to save a little bit of deck space, and again, because you're just drawing so many cards with this deck, you're likely going to see them, where some other decks that might struggle to draw or struggle to filter through their deck really do need to run all 4, especially like decks like White Control, where you have to just really rely on the 4 Ice Shields at all times. So I will say 2 to 3 is definitely the correct. I can agree with this to not play the full 4. Probably would have liked to see 3. Again, me not having a lot of experience with the deck. I did see Floyd's comment on the Facebook group that they felt like 2 was the perfect number. So, hey, in the future, definitely make sure you try out how many of these cards you want to run in there, and definitely make sure to test out the ratios overall. And then getting into some of the 4-2s, we now have just a traditional red mid-range with Ira as really the star of the show. And this list itself is very clearly, influenced or directly evolutioned from the Pro Tour 3 red deck that we saw. So shout out to Pro Play Games for their version of the deck, which was here being evolved for set 4, which is really exciting to see because, again, we did get the absolute star of the show, Hydra, which is just a, comes online, clears the board, and does a lot of work. And again, because you do have the option to, sacrifice some of your own stuff if you really want to, just get even more draw to find those combo pieces like we saw in the Smag deck. But in this version, it really is just like a, hey, let's clear the board. We have the gray combo to go into Nova and Ira and all that good stuff. So this is just more, hey, value, big red mid-range good stuff, right? So I am very excited to see this list come together. We, of course, have the Ancient Draw at a 4 of because we are a little bit heavier from what we're going to be seeing on the Ascend stuff. And again, you could actually put in a second Nova if you really wanted to. It's on color. Like, this is the deck that wants to be doing things like Star Blessed Draw and Ancient Draw because you just get to go through so much of your deck. And then on top of it, we also have Volcanic Canyon. So we got the heal, we got the draw, we got the board control elements with Andromeda and Trident Dragon, my boy, coming through once again, getting to, we haven't seen a lot of yellow, surprisingly, so Trident Dragon maybe not getting to do as much as we'd like here compared to some of the other matchups that we've seen in set 3, but still a very solid card. And other than that, right, again, we see Dream Bomb, both main and sideboard, for just trying to counteract some of those Ascend targets, and Countersword also being another MVP, because if they are playing a when summon one, you can actually interrupt them before they go to combat because they trigger the burst condition. So it's a great way to hit the Ira, or again, even some Nova, like we saw going all the way back to set 1 meta, how strong Countersword can actually be. And then the last list that we have for today is Jonathan's list on the Frost Tiger Heavy Armor Form White Control. And a small disclaimer that I want to add here is that there were a lot more lists in general at 4-2. I was just going over placing here. So this is where one of those things that's like, hey, when we look beyond tiebreakers, what else was out there? And it was a lot more white and purple. And I think these are two decks in particular that just need a little bit more time to deck build and see how the meta is going to, change out. And then we're going to really see these becoming a bit more into that 5-1 category and convert more into that 5-1 category as they had more time to work on these sideboards or just work on some of the main deck cards themselves. So white control, what really changed, with set 4? Not much, all things considered, other than, as we saw, the Frost Tiger Heavy Armor form here on the left-hand side, which gets to bottom deck some stuff, which is nice. But in general, it is still going to be playing like, hey, here's my Newman City, here's my Elephant, here's my Durm Dyna for unblockable damage, here's some of my mid-game spirits I'm going to put things like Suppression on to try to survive. And I do like the Frozen Waterfall as a 1 of here to really get the value out of the armor form to really try to close out the game, to just be able to attack for a big body amount, untap, control the board that way. And then, of course, we do get the unblock effect for armor form as well, which can make it very difficult for your opponent if they're playing kind of a more low-to-the-ground deck. That bouncing 5Ks to the bottom is going to be really disruptive for their game plan. So I do like how that lines up as well. Other than that, we do have the Battery Bolt, which is the Ascend fodder for armor form, right? So you automatically have to run 4 of this guy and 4 of Tiger. And then the other one that really caught me off guard until I read it again was the Promo Turtle, which is going to bounce things. And I just completely forgot it was a Machine Beast. That's on me, going to be perfectly honest. But playing that off the Nilfgaard City and being more disruptive on your opponent's board, especially if they're taking a turn to try to set up some Ascend fodder, and you just bounce it back to their hand and buy yourself another turn, is probably going to be really good in this format. So I'm going to change up my white control list to be something closer to this because I think that turtle is going to be going the distance. But again, we have a pretty good showing overall here between the color pie and a couple different decks that we can look forward to. So with that out of the way, that is a quick look at the top 8 or the top 8 standings from the Grand Tour in Sydney. And let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Is Hydra going to be the tier 0 menace that everyone is claiming it to be? Or is it going to go the way of Gale, where it was beyond overhyped and people just needed more time to test the format? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. Again, with more Battle Spirit Saga content coming in the future. I'm dealing with some end-of-year stress and a lot of stuff at work that's going on, so I haven't had as much time as I'd like to work on content in general, but I have my cards finally. I want to record some versus videos. I just got to find someone who's willing to record some content and hopefully get that out for you very, very soon. So with that, my friends, of course, as always, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.